Hello, welcome back again. Now, I know what you're thinking. I am not doing world building today. I'm covering locations. And of course, world building does include creating locations for your adventures, for your worlds in the first place. So that's certainly, I suppose, that's part of it. But no, today it's definitely about locations. To sort of give you a bit of help, this is a program I run every 2 months. I have something new for you this time round. I've decided to include a sort of two presentations. You're not getting one presentation, you're getting two presentations. For those of you who like the idea of getting two presentations, great. For those of you who are hoping we're going to be making and building some tools, I totally understand. But I thought that this was a good idea to do this way, okay? I'm going to put up a poll. Feel free to take part in that poll. My suggestion is grab your food and drink. Make sure you're comfortable. I have an interesting topic for you today. And so my suggestion, if you are not watching and you're just listening, this is going to work for you pretty well. Anyway, let's get started, shall we? Hi, welcome to How to RPG. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about tabletop role-playing games, D&D, Pathfinder, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't really matter. This is part of Game Master preparation. This is lesson 4, creating locations, building your own locations for your adventures in some way. And what I have for you is a set program with something to sort of help work through that problem you have in terms of getting inspiration. So we're going to add a little bit more today. So the overview, inspiration for creating locations. And as I said, I've actually got some suggestions for you. How to create locations, location details and information, and then some specific location layouts. Now, normally I would cover a specific layout, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to do something else. I think you'll still find that useful. And some miscellaneous recommendations. Okay. Objectives: explain how to build an adventure location or a location for your world in your tabletop role-playing game. Demonstrate that process. I'm not going to do so much demonstration today, but I'm going to talk a lot about this. And participate, practicing that example. I would normally have that happen. I just want you to give your feedback today. So a bit of Q&A is definitely part of it. All right, let's get into this. Inspiration for creating locations. Like, where do you get it from? Where does it come from? I always go back to real-world architecture and landmarks, where you find an image of a historical building, a structure, an area, and you work with that. That's your main tool. And then, of course, books and movies offer many sort of landscapes and places that are quite exotic that you can utilize in your game as well. Video games that have an RPG play experience usually present quite a lot of dynamic environments to them that you can explore, so video games is a good place to poach from. And then pictures, paintings, landscape, and now I'm talking about art done in oil, acrylic, or watercolor. These can also generate ideas for you that might be quite useful in the games that you are running. You can also use pre-made role-playing game published adventures that have locations, and usually a pre-made adventure will also include a map, so you can utilize that as well. Then there is, of course, Google search. You can spend a lot of time on Google search, looking through Pinterest, ArtStation, DeviantArt for images and locations to sort of inspire your imagination. There's another one, and as a result of technology, we actually have at our disposal now what is called artificial intelligence. So ChatGPT can pretty much scrape the internet for every idea that has ever been published on the World Wide Web, including images. But if you want to have written material, you can certainly use ChatGPT to do something like that. So I'm not suggesting you do that, but it's certainly a tool available for you, particularly if you're not publishing. Next, how to create a location. Like, what's that process look like? Like, I, again, will go back to real-world architecture. You can always do a lot more with real-world architecture and then make it more fantastical. You can change it up if you're dealing with a fantasy world. You can change it up again if you're dealing with a science fiction world. So there are usually lots of plans, layout, diagrams, deck plans for ships, floor plans for buildings and ruins that you can utilize, that are structures that have existed in the past, that are actually real, that you can port over to your game. It's one of the easiest ways. It's like you look for, type in layout, and you want the layout of a particular historical piece of architecture. You can probably find the layout for that. You can also check out Sly Flourish's fantastic locations. Now, his preparation method is boiled down to, and his book is boiled down to, this one sentence. You're going to make it old, you're going to make it large, you're going to give it unique features, you're going to make it functional, okay? And you're going to give it an interesting name. And if you do that, you've pretty much covered all your bases. Focus on making the location a reusable set piece is really helpful for future preparation, because many locations tend to repeat themselves. Now, I've mentioned this before. Things like villages and towns and cities usually have the same structure. Castles can vary quite substantially. There are so many different types of castles, but as long as you understand, what the castle tower looks like, what your small castle and your larger castles can sort of function like and look like, a little bit of research and you can probably get there. Next, strongholds. Now, strongholds can be literally anything. A tomb. Tombs usually have the same structure, okay, particularly the Egyptian tomb. Pyramids, again, almost always have the same structure, although I would say the Mayan temple and the Egyptian temple are slightly different. Mazes. Now, you can just pick up an activity book that has mazes in it and just use that. So even though you're using a different maze for your adventure and your location, really you are reusing the same concept, Temples. Temples usually have the same structure. Shrines, a mine. There are essentially 3 different types of mines. I've talked about this before, and you can use, you of course will want to use the bell-shaped mine, the underground bell-shaped mine. Okay, that's the one you want to structure out or lay out for yourself. And then the cave. A cave can be anything. It doesn't really matter. Monster lairs tend to have very similar sort of structures to them as well. And then the death trap dungeon, look, is just a combination of all these things I've just been talking about. And then, of course, you have the treasure vault and the sailing ship. And, of course, there are other things that you can build and use as well, but these are things you're probably going to reuse over and over again. And you can use the same structures and the same maps and the same layouts and, slight adjustments. People won't even know. Ensure the location is interactive for your player characters, because it's the tool for one of the 3 pillars of play in any game that you're playing. It doesn't matter if it's D&D, any kind of tabletop role-playing game, there's usually some sort of exploration, investigation aspect to an adventure, okay, that you're playing. And the location is about exploration. It really is. Draw a picture with digital tools, or you can use paper and pencil or pen, and, make some changes to an existing map if you want. Change it up for your adventure. Relabel that map, or just label that map if you're doing it from scratch and you're drawing your own maps. Again, I'm going to refer you back to things like artificial intelligence, like ChatGPT. Won't get you the map itself, but you can certainly, again, use it to create a location for you. Stable diffusions, surprisingly, you can actually get maps drawn using artificial intelligence. If you give it specific instructions and you're using a reasonably good artificial intelligence art program, you can probably get what you want without having to draw it yourself. So you can literally just create it using some sort of, Midjourney would probably do the same thing, Starry AI, but Stable Diffusion is probably the best one, but you kind of had to pay a bit of money for that one. Then, of course, we have things like the Game Master's Book of Random Encounters. It's just full of locations that are repurposable. Okay, you'll find that the Pathfinder role-playing Game Mastery Guide, the first edition one, is full of information on how to build your locations from about page 178 to 181. It's only 3 pages, but it does a really good job. And then I would encourage people at Wally DM's Journal of Puzzle Encounters. Literally, it gives you a table of just 100 different types of rooms. Now, that's not a great huge location. Those are just small microcosms, but it's still pretty useful. And then most Dungeon Master guides have something in it that you can use. I would suggest to you that the back of the Dungeon Master guide is pretty good at giving you most of the things that you need for D&D 5e. Okay, it's really just a repurposing of the information in the Dungeon Master Guide for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Ed Edition that Gary Gygax was responsible for writing. So yeah, you can certainly do it that way. Okay, now that we've done that bit and we've got a sort of a basic idea of how we're going to do it, our location needs details and information. So what details and information do we need? What do we need to sort of put together? So we want to know who created that location. If it's man-made, okay, if it's made by a sentient creature, if it's made by a woman or a man, or it's made by a troglodyte or a dwarf or something like that, we want to know who made it. So who made that location? If it's naturally forming, then we don't need to worry about that sort of thing. You can check out something like the Dungeon Master Guide, has a whole bunch of ideas about who created stuff on page 100 of the D&D 5e book. But you can usually find tables in other places that will give you that information. What is the purpose of that location? So give it a function. All locations that have been constructed have a purpose, they have a function. Now it might have been repurposed. It might have started out as a mine and now it's something else. That's up to you, but you want to have a purpose or a function for your location. What is the history around that location? And why is that location important for your adventure? There's a big factor to consider. Remember, when you're creating locations and you're creating it for your world, all you often need is the name of that location. And that's it. But if you're running an adventure, you then have to sort of broaden things out. You won't need to just have the name of that location. You'll need a bit more information. This is where maps and details about that location become important. Like the history now is important, particularly if you're wanting to drop hints and clues in that location for the players to learn about. And players often do want to know about the history of a location by exploring that location in some way. Who inhabits the location? Or who did inhabit or populate that location in the past, and now who is populating or occupying that area now, okay? Your general population, I don't mean a hodgepodge of different monsters and creatures. I mean who generally is the one who's mostly in control of that location, if anything. Then we have your positioning of hazards and obstacles in the location. What are these? These are things like traps that have been put together, constructed, puzzles that might have been used to stop or lock. Essentially, a puzzle is a lock. It's a complex lock, that's all it is. And then you have your natural hazards that aren't created in some way, they're just there. And that's one of the biggest aspects of your location, is making sure you have those elements. Next, you have your environmental dressing, your location dressing. These are objects and furniture. This is environmental terrain. You want to add features to your location with aspects that are interesting, something that the players can manipulate so that when they're exploring, they get to focus on finding something that somebody else has never found before. This is the secret door. This is the secret location. Now, once you've done all that sort of thing, you've pretty much got what you need. Now, you might be thinking, oh, but Fred, you haven't actually talked about, why they are there. That's a different topic. That's for a topic for another day. We're just dealing with the location itself. Now, there is lots of software out there that allows you to draw up location maps. And I usually do like some miscellaneous recommendations to people. So this is where I'm heading. You don't have to draw the location map. Quite often you might not need a map at all. You don't have to draw a good location map because you're not selling it. You're using it for your home group. So they're not going to be quite so pedantic about all of this. It is not necessary to learn how to use mapping software for drawing up maps, because there are alternative methods. You can use random generators. You can just draw it by hand, and just a rough sketch is perfectly fine. And there's nothing wrong with just poaching somebody else's stuff for your own game. Repurpose it, reuse it, do something with it. And often you'll find, as I've said, that a lot of these locations that you might be trying to draw up have already been drawn before. They actually exist in the real world. You just need to do a bit of tracing and you'll be fine. So many different maps have been made for fantasy locations and science fiction locations. You can still borrow existing maps to your heart's desire. So don't get too worried about those sorts of things. And then filling in the details, there's usually some sort of tool out there that allows you to do that if you get stuck. Okay, random tables are quite common. I hope this was useful to you and interesting. I want to thank you for watching and listening. I want to thank all of my patrons who support me on Patreon so that I can keep doing this program, because I like the idea of coming back to locations every couple of months and giving you something slightly different each time. And so I'm going to keep doing that if I can, and the patrons make that possible. So I hope this was useful to you. And until next time, keep rolling those 20s. Give me a second, I'm not gone. Okay. Now, at this point, I would drink some water, I would check on chat, and then we would build or make something. Today, we're not going to build or make something. Instead, this is chat time. This is chat time. I want to talk a little bit more about where you get your inspiration from. And I guess one of the biggest problems that people have is where to start. And often when I say use real world locations, people are like, well, yeah, but which real world locations, Fred? Because you haven't really kind of given me anything else. You want a sweatshop, Pale Rider. Hello, Pale Rider and Fred Huber. So I've decided to do a bit of a presentation. Now, I'm not going to make it formal. It's going to be very sort of informal so that I get across what I want to get across. And I'm not pressing the record button, so this is not going to be an edited video or anything like that. It's part of this live stream. So there are 3 areas that I go to if I get stuck. When it comes to real world architecture, real world locations, and I want something fantastical, something exotic, something more than what I can come up with. And quite often somebody has either created a picture or knows of a location or has built something that is absolutely amazing. Whether you call it mankind, humankind, the reality is there are so many amazing things in the world and the wonders of the world. Like there are the great wonders of the world, the great man-made or humankind wonders of the world. If you want a structure that is created, this is a really good place to start. So I'm going to go through some of them because there's a lot. There is a huge number of them, and you probably already know what they are. You have just forgotten what they are, or it didn't quite occur to you. And so I'm going to point that out. So that's what I'm going to cover today. The great wonders of the world, the man-made humankind wonders. And then the next time I come back to this, I'm going to go through the natural wonders of the world, okay? Because there's a lot of them, and they are absolutely fantastic and amazing, and you can use them in your games. I try thinking of the big bad evil guy's motivations and have them. Yes. Look. That's part of the adventure building process rather than the location. So this is where I start really talking about some of the real world locations that you can use that exist right now. And the first one is the Great Wall of China. You know what that is. The Great Wall of China is it's a series of fortified walls, stone walls, that was built across like the northern border of ancient China. And it was used essentially to protect China and its neighboring states, it's from nomadic tribes and groups Eurasian steppe, basically. there's somebody who's going to invade you. You want to stop that from happening, and it's a long wall. For those of you who don't realize just how long it is immensely long. It is many, many miles long. Okay, it is. I would say I believe it is 13,171 miles long. Now, much of that wall now has been removed or taken apart, and it's kind of getting lost to time, and it's getting eroded, and it's not being kept up because the Chinese government is not, making sure that it's retained. But it existed in a complete form at some point. That is an amazing concept, to think that there's a wall that long and that big that was fortified, that was actually used to protect that country. And you can definitely use that in your game. Absolutely. Why not? You'd be foolish not to consider it. I always thought that if you wanted to have a large border to a country, and you wanted to protect it from something, big wall. Okay, next. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the largest one, okay? And this one is, well, it's contentious. It is considered the largest Egyptian pyramid, and it was supposed to serve as a tomb to the pharaoh Khuf. Is it Khuf? I think it's Khufu. But is it really that? Or is it just a giant power plant? There's lots of contention. I mean, the going sort of historical narrative is that it's a tomb. It's basically where you bury a pharaoh, and yet they've never found a single pharaoh or mummy or evidence to suggest that they're anything like that in any of the pyramids whatsoever. But it's an amazing feat of engineering. And can you imagine, in your world, you can pepper pyramids to your heart's content all through it. And that just changes things completely, because no matter how you think about it, the sheer size of the pyramids and the Great Pyramid of Giza is immense. I mean, it's 481 feet high or tall, and this thing has been there for a very long time. It's been around probably longer than the historians are actually making out it to be. Okay. Oh, pyramids are power plants. That is confirmed. Well done. So, I mean, some of the other suggestions is that pyramids were used as landing sites for spacecraft. I'm not going there, but I'm going with the power plant idea, because that actually makes a lot more sense. But here we go. So there's two, and these are all created by humankind. Things that are just amazing. We also have the, now if I'm going to get this right, this is going to be hard. It's called the Machu Picchu. Is it Machu Picchu? God, I hope I got that pronounced right. So this is like an Incan citadel set in the Andes Mountain in Peru. And it was built way back in the 15th century. It's abandoned now. But what makes it stand out is its location, which is, I mean, the fact that it was built where it is again, quite amazing. But it's renowned for its really sophisticated dry stone walls that fuses huge blocks of stone. They didn't use mortar. They would actually fuse the stone together. Like, how the heck did they figure that one out? And it's got rather intriguing buildings, because the buildings themselves are laid out as if they have some fairly good understanding of astronomical alignments. So clearly there's something going on there, and you get an amazing view from where it is. It is also incredibly difficult to get to it. It's not that easy to get to. So it really does stand out as being a citadel, a fortified citadel in many cases. Now, you may not have heard of that one. I'm sure you've heard of the first two, pyramids in the Great Wall of China. Now, this is one you probably have heard of, and this is the Colosseum. Now, the Colosseum, this is the elliptical amphitheatre in the centre of the city of Rome in Italy, and it's the largest ancient amphitheatre ever built. and it still stands to this day. And so it's obviously clear for anybody who's done anything in terms of building that the Romans knew more about how to build a structure than we do nowadays. Okay, because literally Roman concrete repairs itself, and the science behind it is only just starting to be understood. But the thing about the Colosseum is it is not just so large, it's how it was used and how it was structured. This wasn't just used for gladiatorial games. It wasn't just a pit fighting arena. There was space for a very large audience. But also, too, they would have chariot races in this thing. You would literally have chariots driving around in a circle, racing each other. And, of course, it was a dangerous thing to be doing. They even filled up the Colosseum with water and had naval battles in it, which is just dumbfounding to consider. How do you make that work? So all of that just says we can definitely port it over to our own game. For those of you who don't know, I spend probably more time watching and listening to historical videos than I do to D&D and RPG videos. Okay, so yes, I spend way too much time. I do never retain as much as I would like, but why not use the Colosseum? Use that idea. What about if you need something where you need to bury somebody? Like a tomb is all right, it's underground, but you want to make it to stand out. Well, the Taj Mahal is a really good example of this. This is that white ivory marble mausoleum, and it's right on the bank of the river, okay, in India. And I don't know if I can even pronounce the river's name. So, Amuna Aga. I don't know if that's correct. I probably ballsed it up pretty badly. But this houses the fifth emperor, Shah Jahan, and his wife, who his beloved wife is also housed or buried in this location. And it is, you've probably seen this building, but did you ever think that it was a mausoleum? Did you ever think that it was a resting place for two people? Or did you think it was a palace? The Taj Mahal is not a palace. It's literally a place where two people are buried. And it's immense. It stands out. So again, you can definitely use an idea like that. We also have the Christ the Redeemer. Now, you probably, if you've watched enough of the sort of Mexico, Brazilian movies, you might have seen this. Christ the Redeemer is an Art Deco statue of Jesus Christ in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And it's sculpted by a French guy called Paul. Now, if I'm going to get this right, Paul Lansky. I think it's Lansky. Lando. God, I'm going to get it wrong. I'm just going to stop saying it. It's going to make it worse. This thing is a major feature. It is positioned on the top of a hill. It oversees the entire city. It is a feature of that location. Now, you don't have to put Jesus Christ as a statue in your game, but you can put a statue in a location like that that's doing essentially the same sort of thing. Okay? And again, it's an amazing feat. The fact that it was positioned on top of that hill, if you've ever seen that hill, it is a hard place to get to. Really difficult. Okay. Another one that sort of stands out, I don't know that many people will have heard of this one. The Petra. The Petra is a famous archaeological site in Jordan's southwest desert. Okay. They reckon it goes back to about 300 BC before Christ. It was the capital of now am I going to get this right? Nabatean Kingdom, and you can only access it through a really narrow canyon called Elsqui. Is it Elsqui? Elsqui? Oh, I'm going to get it wrong. Basically, Petra it's that temple. If you ever watched Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, that's where they go to find the cup of Christ in the movie, right? And then the cup of Christ's located with one of the Knights Templar in that location, and they used Petra for that location. It's a real location, okay? It is basically a tomb, a temple carved into pink sandstone in a cliff face, and it's nicknamed the Rose City. Now, if they thought this was a good idea to include in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, why would you not consider something like this yourself in your adventures as an adventure location? And of course, it's got like a Greek sort of style facade to it, but yeah, there's a lot going on there. It's an amazing location. Again, you can see it if you want to see a good chunk of it. It's in the Indiana Jones movie. I just needed a drink of water. Just bear with me. Now, I haven't even gone through part of. I mean, there's still a lot of locations that I haven't covered that are real locations that you can steal, appropriate, make adjustments to, and use in your games. The next one, and I'm probably going to balls this up because it's Indian. Agkor Wat. Agkor Wat is a Hindu Buddhist temple. It's like a temple complex actually in Cambodia. It's located. Well, it covers a really large area, and basically it's a series of buildings that are all interconnected, all part of the same sort of place. It resides within the ancient city of, now here I go again, Khmer capital city. And it's actually on the Guinness Book of Records as the largest religious site or structure in the world. There isn't a religious site larger than this one. It's that big, because it literally covers 162 hectares. It's immense. So if you wanted a religious site, using some of the ideas from that would be quite useful to you. I don't know if since I kind of ballsed up the name, I might even drop some of this stuff into chat, because I've been mentioning these things and sometimes my pronunciation is absolutely bollocks. So I'm going to do a little bit of a hashtag and drop these in as we go. How's that sound? So if I start talking about something, I want to sort of at least preface it with how what it looks like, so you're not trying to deal with my terrible pronunciation. The Great Wall of China is nice and easy as well. We'll put that in there. Let me do a quick catch up, people, on all the topics I've covered. It'll also help me figure out whether I've talked about something or not yet. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of history and using history as a tool, not to undermine or disrespect anybody, but more as a tool for telling a story that is often more impactful because it's got elements of reality in there. And because they're so dramatic in their nature, it makes a huge difference. I've been amazed at just how useful it is to repurpose existing locations that really exist, and how that works for people who are playing in my games. So these are some of the locations I have chatted about so far. Did I miss any? The Colosseum. I'll put the Colosseum in here as well. I'm sure all of you know what the Colosseum is, okay? I'm sure. But I'll make sure I put them in here. And each time I bring a new topic up. So I have quite a few more left. We are going to be here for another at least 20 minutes, probably a little bit longer. And that's all good with me. I don't mind, frankly, because if I get an opportunity to talk about these sorts of places, since I always find them my inspiration, then great. It works for me. I don't know if it works for you guys, but I'm hoping it will. And I'm sure you'll have your own ideas and locations that you like to use. Taj Mahal, make sure I get it right. And Christ the Redeemer. Some of these are ancient and some of these still actually exist that I've got too. Like, not all of them have disappeared over time. Like, some of them, they're pretty much just little piles of rocks now, but not everything. A lot of this stuff is still around. This is what makes them sort of stand out the most. And okay, we get Petra. Let's get that one in, and then we can get on to the next topic, which is, I see a few people have mentioned some things in the chat too, which we should definitely have a natter about. I like the idea a lot. Okay, so back to chat. I see that Carol, hello, how you doing? Oh, I see. Interesting. Peru, yeah, and Peru. Yep, that's the one. That's what I was talking about. Yeah, it does very much look like that. Very much. We're going to get to that. It's on my list. We're going to discuss that one today. The Tower Bridge in London, absolutely, is a quite an unusual bridge. There actually are some bridges that I mentioned as being fairly significant. Anyway, the Great Library of Alexandria. Yes, definitely. The Great Library of Alexandria. Now, this one I'm going to bull's name up of because it's Mexican, okay? And I always struggle with anything that isn't, if it's got more than 3 letters or 4 letters, and it's not the word dogs, it's probably going to be difficult for me to do, okay? And that is the Chichen Itza. I think that's Chichen Itza. I think that's what it's called. Literally Chichen Itza. I'm hoping I got it correct, but if I didn't, you'll probably correct me. You can correct me all you like. It won't make any difference because it won't change the fact that I probably still botched it up. I'm going to take my hat off, okay, because my hat is getting in the way now. So this is I read a complex Mayan ruins, and it's on the peninsula. It's a massive stepped pyramid. So much like the Great Pyramid of Giza, it itself is just amazing that they understood how to build a structure like this and do it so efficiently, and that it would last as long as it did. Okay, it has massive steps. It is sort of considered a temple in many respects, but I mean it's hard to know what they use. I mean, a lot of those ancient Mexican pyramids are. They're more like I think most of them were considered to be used as for sacrifice and worship and so forth. There's a lot of blood spilled on those stairs, I imagine, and it's made up of graphic stone carvings. Those have actually survived on the structure itself. Like you can still see some of the carvings. The Temple of the Warriors, the Wall of Skulls. There's a whole lot of stuff associated with that. So you don't have to just have a pyramid that looks like an Egyptian pyramid. You could use that. Next is the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. I'm pretty sure most people have probably heard of it, but have never really known much more than that. That it's out there and nothing else. But this location is quite famous, even though almost always overlooked. Hello, Steve Lee. How are you doing? Thank you for mentioning the Great Library of Alexandria. So what is this place? Well, it's a garden, as the name suggests, but it's also considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. I mean, when I say the ancient world, I mean before the birth of Christ. So before Christ. It was built back in 600 BC and it was destroyed by an earthquake in 226 BC. So it doesn't exist anymore in its original form, but it was considered a fantastic location. And considering where it was and how difficult water was to probably get to that location back there, is saying a lot. Like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Now, somebody was mentioning the Library of Alexandria, but there's also the Lighthouse of Alexandria. Now, the Lighthouse of Alexandria is a very large location. I mean, considering its time and when it was put up, it's pretty significant. Okay, you've probably heard of it, maybe at least in passing, and that's it. So a place like this is, I guess, it was built basically as part of the ancient Egyptian kingdom. Okay, and it was used to help ships navigate those waters around there. So it's got a purpose to it, and also it was quite tall. You know, it's at least 100 meters overall in height, so it's quite tall. And for the time and when it was put up, that would have been a big issue. Like how do you make something with that kind of height and have it survive? It is not quite the same as building a pyramid. I totally understand, but it was certainly considered one of the 7 wonders of the world, the ancient world, back in its time. So yes, if you wanted to have a lighthouse, you want to position it on some rocks, that's great. But maybe having a lighthouse as part of the city, the ancient city in your world, is going to be something that's going to work for you a lot more. Okay, now I see people are mentioning stuff in the chat, and I want to respond, but I also want to try to get through as many of these as I possibly can. Yes, I'll get there, Fred Huber. Don't worry, it's on my list. It's on my list. Yes, Calrel, yes, you're right. Absolutely. A lot of different cultures built their cities into a cliff face or into a mountainside or into rocks, sometimes just to hide from the enemy, sometimes because it just seemed like a better idea than trying to build a rock home. Like when you build a place, you want it to survive long enough. You're not just building it for yourself. You're building it for your children. When you build a house back then, you were building it for your children as well. Fred Hooper, I use the floor plan of a school in the Navy as an adventure map. Yes, I've used, for those of you who don't know, I disguised it. I used the Millennium Falcon ship deck plan, which I had for a fantasy adventure. I had it as a crashed ship. I didn't make it clear. It was mostly covered in stone, rock and stuff, and it took them a little while to figure out they were in the Millennium Falcon, but they did. It took a little while. Call of Cthulhu uses this sort of locations, and it's a massive, underrated tabletop role-playing game. I believe so. Yeah. Anyway, let's keep going because there's still a few more to discuss. So let's keep throwing another couple of names your way. Now, we were talking about the Taj Mahal, and if you want a mausoleum that sort of stands out, this is going way, way back, okay? Now, I don't think I'm going to be able to pronounce this correctly, but I'm going to try really hard. Helicanius. I think it's the Mausoleum of Helicanius. I think that's right. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what the pronunciation is. I was not very familiar with this one. This is not something that I kind of come across that often. A lot of the other ones I was relatively familiar with. Not all of them, but, It is supposed to be a tomb. So it's just a very large tomb. It was built back in 353 BC, or between that and maybe 350 BC. It's not exactly, they're not entirely sure exactly when, because it's before the birth of Christ, so it's going to be a bit harder. And it's stepped. It's in a very unusual location. It is designed by a Greek, and it sort of overlooks it's on a bit of sort of like a hill, and it overlooks a region, an area. It stands out. I don't believe it still stands though. I think it's mostly gone now. I think it was pretty much destroyed back in it was destroyed back in 1404 AD after the death of Christ. So yeah, the monument is it's mostly gone. It's mostly gone. These things don't always stand up to time. Sometimes things happen. Natural disasters are an issue. Next, now I think somebody may have mentioned this before. The Temple of Artemis. Now, the Temple of Artemis has got multiple names. It's not just got one name. So even if you haven't heard of the Temple of Artemis, you've probably heard of this location if you've done any kind of historical research, or you may have heard of it from a movie or something like that, and just not been aware that that's what we were talking about. The Temple of Artemis. So what is the Temple of Artemis? Well, it's also known as the Temple of Artemisin, I think that's right. It's also most probably, you're going to identify it probably from this one, the Temple of Diana. If you've heard of the Temple of Diana, it's a Greek temple dedicated to the ancient localized form of the goddess Artemis. Okay? And so the Temple of Diana. It was mostly destroyed. I mean, obviously it was built back. It was a long time ago, before the birth of Christ, 550 BC, before birth of Christ. But there's not much left of it, really. I think there's just foundation stones now. But it was supposed to be quite an impressive location. It was destroyed or ruined back in 401 AD. And there were just, like I said, just fragments of what used to exist there, which is a shame. So it was supposed to be a fairly significant location. I think at one point it was one of the 7 wonders of the world. I don't know that it falls under that bracket, because that list of the 7 wonders of the ancient world has sort of changed. Sometimes you've probably heard of a list called the 13 wonders of the world. These, it depends on whether you're talking about ancient world or current modern world or in between. I mean, yeah, so that doesn't matter, but still an amazing place. So if you need to build a temple somewhere, the Temple of Artemis is something you want to definitely consider reproducing in your game, because it's going to work quite nicely. Thank you very much. Now, for those of you in North America, you may be surprised that I mentioned this one, and that is the Empire State Building. Now, it's not ancient society or anything like that. The Temple of Diana equals Wonder Woman stronghold confirmed. Oh, come on. But seriously, even for me in New Zealand, it was always acknowledged that the Empire State Building was one of the greatest structures until the last couple of decades, where things have been built that are even taller. It was considered in the modern age the tallest building ever. And it held that status for quite a while. Of course, it doesn't anymore, because there are things that have been built that are even taller than that, but they're using different technology, so that's to be expected. So why not consider in your adventure having a large building that's just really tall with a spire on the top? Hello, Natra Man. How you doing? Nice to have you here. Michael Riggs, map of King Tut's tomb for a one-shot. I've covered King Tut's tomb many times before on my channel. We could certainly talk about that. I don't really consider that a particularly exciting location because I have talked about it so many times. But if it's new for you and you would like to use it, just do it. You can find a lot of maps and layouts for King Tut's tomb, or at least speculation about what's there. They're still trying to figure out what's down there. I don't think all of the chambers have been explored. One, because often when they're exploring these old ancient tombs, they're quite dangerous to they have traps that are still functional today. But it's not just traps, it's just the geology of the area makes it dangerous to deal with. Now, if you haven't heard of, I think now here we go. This is one you will definitely have heard of, and this is the Pantheon. I believe it's called the Pantheon. It's a former temple as well, and you've probably seen a picture of it somewhere or an image of it somewhere in the past, and just not been aware of it. Let me just make sure I get the name in here, and there we go. This structure is kind of like the iconic Greek structure that you would expect anywhere. It sort of represents this temple, the structure, this Greek temple, represents kind of everything about what you would expect from Greece, ancient Greece. Okay, it is a temple dedicated to the goddess Athena. It goes back as far as the 5th century before Christ. It's decorated with sculptures, so it's got a lot going for it. So it's not just pillars and stuff like that. Often when you just look at the picture from the outside, an image of it from the outside, it just looks like, oh, it's just a bunch of pillars without a roof. It's got holy walls. That's why it must be a temple, because it's holy. Hole in the ceiling, hole in the walls. But no, that's not what's going on here. So yes, consider it a place that is full of art, a lot of symbolism from ancient Greece, and a lot of that symbolism is around democracy and what has kind of made Western society, which is kind of interesting in many respects. So yes, as a structure, consider it as something that you could port over into your game. And then what else have we got here? Now, if you've been to China, you may be aware of this. In fact, you've probably heard of this at some point. I think most people have. And that is the Forbidden City. So this is a palace, or a palace complex. And it's in Beijing, China. It is the center of the imperial city of Beijing. And it still stands to this very day. It's still there. The compound itself is quite involved, and I would highly recommend considering, if you need a place that's really important, taking the concept and structure and the layout of the Forbidden City in China is going to work for you really well. It really will. Somebody's mentioned, Calrell's mentioned the Golden Gate Bridge. Yes, the Golden Gate Bridge, whether you realize it or not, the Golden Gate Bridge is considered to be one of the modern age master engineering feats. Considering at the time when it was built and what it's trying to do, it's a suspension bridge which is just unbelievable. So I would definitely consider that. So, I believe a few of you yesterday were talking about bridges and turning it into a skill challenge. The Golden Gate Bridge sort of is the antithesis of a massive bridge that looks incredibly dangerous to cross, but a master feat of engineering and construction. So absolutely. Now, what have you got here? Crank des Chevaliers, huge Crusader castle in Syria. I'm not aware of that. Destroyed in the last few years. Oh, that's a shame. I'm not aware of that one. I know there's a lot of castles around the world that have kind of fallen to ruin or been destroyed. Some of them still exist, but a lot of them have gone. There were so many castles back in the day. And castles are a problem. Castles are one of those things that you want to reuse, but it's quite difficult because if you look historically at castles, they change so much. A tall building with no visible entrance. Yes, very much so. I agree. Yeah, and I've done that before. A tower, a large tower with no visible entrance. I put that in. I put that into the Princess of the Silver Palace, I believe it was, that adventure. I ran that and I put that into there. Just to see what my players would do. The pyramid was a great battery, and the capstone, the tip of the pyramid, was a beacon. Well, that's certainly the theory. Let's get real. No matter what it is, they're still just theories. Yep. You converted a goblin bazaar into a shopping mall. Even included a food court. Well, nice one. So the Forbidden City. For those of you who are unaware of the Forbidden City, I'm sure you know about it. Now, next there's Began. Now, this one I'm not quite so familiar with. I don't know that I've probably watched on, there's a channel I watch called Origins Explained. And Origins Explained is awesome. The lady, maybe you'll find the voice a little bit annoying. You've got David, whose voice is sort of very male and very matter of fact, and then you've got Christina, who's a little bit different. Sounds like a Valley girl, frankly. But Began is a temple, okay, and historically it's pretty significant, but it's in Cambodia. A lot of things in Cambodia kind of get lost. There's a lot of history, a lot of really large religious complexes that are in Cambodia that people have never heard of. Quite often because they're Buddhist sanctuaries or structures, and they often get lost in jungles. So it's, they're hard to find or really hard to get to. There's a lot of stuff that's just really difficult to get to. I believe it fell under, at one point, the 7 best man-made world wonders, and I think officially right now it's under the top 10 man-made wonders of the world, officially. Maybe that's changed now. A lot of this stuff might be old, but I think that's where it was sitting at some point. What else do we have here? We have, now you've probably heard of it, and you've probably seen movies about it, and you've probably just assumed that it never actually existed, but it did exist, okay? And it was built for worship around Zeus, okay? So, and that is the statue of Zeus at Olympus. It's a real structure, a real location. You can do this with any of your gods. You could create a structure, a location like this for any of your gods in your world. But the statue of Zeus at Olympus. So this it's enormous. It's 39 feet high. It was built sometime around 432 BC before Christ. And it was built by a Greek sculptor. Now, Phidias. I believe it's Phidias. P.H. Phidias. I'm pretty sure it's Phidias. Okay. The structure itself is carved from ivory, and it has Zeus on a throne of cedar wood. For those of you who are wondering, why does that have any real significance? Because I believe at one point it was part of the 7 wonders of the world, or 7 wonders of the ancient world, to be exact. That list changed over time. As things get built and so forth, that list gets adjusted, okay? So I know I've mentioned this, the 7 wonders of the ancient world a few times. You're like, well, I'm sure you've mentioned more than 7 things. How can that work? Those lists change. They get adjusted over time. The temple, it's a part of the temple. It's erected in the temple of Zeus. And Zeus is the sky and thunder god, for those of you who are aware of Greek religion and mythology and how that sort of works. He is, of course, the king of the gods of Mount Olympus. And it's a very large structure and very unique. This one, you will have heard of for sure, and that is the Easter Island statues. Now, the Easter Island statues, more and more is being learnt about the Easter Island statues because we don't actually see the entire statue. They are still excavating material to discover that there's a lot more to the Easter Island statues. I think these make a really good idea. Nobody really understands what is going on with the Easter Island statues. I think some of the speculation is that they are depictions of their, ancient elders of of that society, or aliens, or whatever. It might be much simpler than that. Who knows? Now, so the Easter Island statues, it's supposed to be one of the man-made world wonders again. I don't know that it's necessary. I don't know if it's still on that list as part of the ancient world wonders, but it might well be. It's in a very isolated location in the Pacific, in the Pacific Ocean, and some of these types of statues have cropped up in unusual places. Peru has been a place that is supposedly there have been statues like this that have popped up, but also in the North Pacific region as well. And the Easter Island statues, of course, is associated with Easter Island. So there's obviously a lot more below them. As they dig down, they're discovering that these statues are significantly larger than they first thought they were. Next. Now, somebody already mentioned the Golden Gate Bridge, so I won't talk too much about the Golden Gate Bridge since it's kind of already come up. San Francisco is known for the Golden Gate Bridge. In a modern age, when it was built, it was a thing. And it would be easy to duplicate something like that as a structure for your adventure. And it looks terrifying to cross, frankly. Okay. Next one, the Karnak Temple. I think I got Karnak Temple right. I don't really know an awful lot about the Karnak Temple myself. I know it is part of the man-made wonders of the world, and there's quite a few of them as it happens. So it's a religious complex. Okay, it's really important for the location in Egypt and Thebes. It's also, I wouldn't say that it's that easy to get to. A lot of these places, the reason very few people know about them is they're so difficult to reach. Like they don't require. It's not like they're part of the tour route generally. Quite often they're really just impossible to reach. But I thought I'll at least mention it. Now, I believe that Fred Hubert was mentioning this one, and I've been leaving it off because this one is quite amazing. I understand that it no longer stands. It was destroyed a long time ago, and it is the Colossus of Rhodes. Colossus of Rhodes is the sort of thing that you probably remember seeing something kind of very similar in Lord of the Rings, the movies. You've probably seen a lot of the sort of stuff in Jason and the Argonauts. You've probably seen bits and pieces from Clash of the Titans. The Colossus of Rhodes is immense. And the fact that it was able to be built back then is just unbelievable. So the Colossus of Rhodes was the last of the 7 to be completed after 280 BC, before Christ. But it was also the first to be destroyed by an earthquake. So I believe the earthquake back in 226, 225 BC, that's when it was destroyed. So what the heck is this thing? It is a statue that stands 108 feet tall. It was the tallest statue in the ancient world. It is approximately the size of the Statue of Liberty. For those of you who know how big the Statue of Liberty is, it's approximately that size. But back in the ancient world, that was like how do you do something like that? That's quite a feat. And you can do this with, like, this is a common thing to do in fantasy worlds, is to create a statue of immense size. And whether you call it the Colossus of Rhodes or you call it something else, it doesn't matter. It really, they really do stand out. And of course, I believe the Colossus of Rhodes was often depicted as having its legs sort of spread across the entrance to a harbour. Yeah. I always find that amusing myself. Quite amusing, actually. I just need a drink of water. Okay, next one. I believe I've covered just about all the ones that I wanted to today, but there's two more that we will quickly discuss. You know what this one is. For those of you who are unaware, this one is so popular and so famous that people have been rebuilding it in other parts of the world. Like, everybody wants to have one of these things. And that is the Eiffel Tower. As you know, the Eiffel Tower is in France, Paris. It is a wrought iron laced tower. Gustave Eiffel was the one who was the engineer for it, and it was built back in 1887 to 1889, and there has been a lot of criticism, but it's iconic. It is so popular that people have tried to buy the Eiffel Tower and export it out of France. That's how popular it is. As a result of this, since France will never let it go, and I don't blame them, why would they want one of their biggest tourist attractions to ever go anywhere? The Eiffel Tower is run into all sorts of big problems structurally, because it, how do you make something that is as old as that still stand and not have metal fatigue? So there's a lot of work that needs to be done on that thing. I believe the Japanese really wanted to have the Eiffel Tower, and they couldn't. And so what they did is, after trying to buy, I think they might have even purchased it. Maybe they haven't. I can't remember. But I know that there's no way they're going to get the Eiffel Tower out of France. They're not going to be able to decouple it and then take it away. So they built one in Tokyo. They've literally built their own Eiffel Tower in Tokyo. I believe it's called the Tokyo Tower, as you might expect. There are many places around the world that are definitely interested in creating their own Eiffel Tower as a centre point and attraction of some kind. Just because the idea of going up something really, really high and looking out. The Japanese just realised that, well, we'll just build our own. We'll just build our own, no problems. Okay, we can't get your one. It's all right. So yes, you could definitely include something like that. There's a lot to be said for that. The Eiffel Tower was supposed to be dismantled after the World's Fair it was made for. Yeah, but it never got dismantled. It's been standing there, and they've been spending years trying to figure out how to keep it going because it has been such a feature. The last one that I want to talk about, again, made by humankind, mankind, womankind, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to balls the name up really badly, okay? Tahakan, I think that's right. Oh my God, it's Mexican, okay? So I've probably balls the name up completely. It's a complex in the northeast of the Mexico City area, and it's run down. It's sort of what would be a part of it that would sort of stand out? You may have heard of the Avenue of the Dead, which is linked to this. It links the temple and a pyramid of the moon to the pyramid of the sun, and yeah, you can view it from a summit too. So it's I would say it's more of a museum than anything else right now. It's a large location, and it's still there. And I think it's sort of a good indication of what society back there was like. It was built back in 100 BC, before Christ, and yeah, yeah, pretty famous location because, like, you've probably at some point you've probably heard of the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon, or at least one of those. Okay, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of the temple that's there because it's too hard. But that area is pretty significant, and you definitely want to consider looking at that when you're constructing your own stuff. It was part of one of the 12 humankind or human-made wonders of the world. I believe at one time it was part of the 10 greatest man-made wonders of the world as well. Again, a lot of these lists don't mean very much because these things change, and often, yeah, that's it. That's basically it. So I don't know how many I've covered today. There's a lot of different structures that are made in the real world, made by humans, that are quite incredible, that you can use in your fantasy worlds or even your science fiction worlds, okay? And they really do stand out, and I would suggest using them. If you need natural wonders of the world, well, that's a different thing, and there are so many. There are significantly more. There could be 100 different natural wonders of the world, many of which have been destroyed now or don't exist anymore. But I think that's for another day. I hope that you enjoyed hanging out with me where we talk about essentially history and the different structures that have been built. I'll tell you right now that quite a lot of these are things that I don't know an awful lot about. I'm pretty familiar with the chaos of Rhodes, the Eiffel Tower, the Karnak Temple, the Golden Gate Bridge, of course, because most of us are, the Easter Island statues, the statue of Zeus at Olympia, the Forbidden City, because most of us are, the Parthenon, the Empire State Building, the Temple of Artemis, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, and the Colosseum, the Taj Mahal, Christ, the Redeemer, those things. Obviously, the pyramids of Giza, Great Wall of China. Those things are things that I know a lot more about. A lot of the other ones I'm not quite so familiar with. But I'm hoping this was interesting, and sort of I've given you at least a list of places that you could go and do a bit of research about and then use in your own games. This is what this is all about today. If you were wondering what the heck I was on about when I put the title together for this, inspiration for your adventure locations, these are the places I would suggest you go first. Let's end this poll for today before I disappear. The rifts in the St. Louisiana Arch became a permanent rift portal. I thought that was cool. Yeah, so the Rift game, for those of you who know, Rifts is a game system or a game world, and they use a lot of stuff from the real world. They put it over, and because you don't have to worry about copyright. That's one of the great things about using real world locations, is if you decide you want to publish it, you can, because it's not copyrighted. It's not copyrightable. Do you know what I mean? So that's quite helpful. Do you struggle coming up with ideas for adventure locations? Yes, 35%. Well, I doubt you're going to have any problem now. I think you'll be fine. No, 28%. Just watching, 28%, and undecided, 7% out of 14 votes. Anyway, I am going to get out of here. I'm going to leave you. I will be back tomorrow to do character building. I believe we're doing the techie tomorrow for Ultramodern 5. But till then, I want to thank everybody for watching and listening. I hope this was interesting to you. This is really I'm scratching an itch because I like history and I like using history in my games. So I've scratched my itch as much as I possibly can today. So thank you for watching and listening. Thank you for taking part in the poll if you did. I want to thank all of my patrons who support me on Patreon, because without you, it's just not possible. I also really want to thank those of you in the live chat who've been commenting. Fred Huber, Pale Rider, I believe we had Steve Lee, Nacho Man, Cal Rell was here, and Michael Riggs also. Thank you for your 2 cents and your feedback and your suggestions and ideas. It really does help when people use the chat. And I encourage you to become a subscriber so that you can. This is the whole point when you jump into my live streams, is this is an opportunity to have at least a chat with me about stuff. And hopefully you don't feel intimidated by the whole process, okay? I'm hoping that's not the case. I'm going to tell you now, I'm not an expert, okay? I'm just a normal guy. It's not like I know that much. Anyway, wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbors. And hey, maybe try using some real-world locations in your adventures for your fantasy locations. Till next time, keep rolling those 20s.